those from 18 to 33 will control who the next president is going to be. And obviously, many people are going to be reaching out to you as we are here, not to tell you what to think, but to expose you to different ideas and to make up your own mind. We are truly honored today to have Senator Bill Nelson come. With everything he's doing and everything he's involved in, it took a great effort on his part to come. But you know, I'm not surprised. I happen to be a Bill Nelson fan. My family is. My number 2 daughter worked for him up in Washington for a while, and I have been proud to see what he's done over the years. The senator has spent his lifetime in service in the state legislature, in the cabinet, as an astronaut, and now as a U.S. senator, one of the leaders in the United States Senate. I'd like you to give him a warm, healthy round of applause. Senator Bill Nelson.
I never forgot. Thank you. No, I remember. Lou Frey is an example of what we are missing today. Washington, indeed even Tallahassee, has gotten way too partisan, way too ideologically rigid, way too much of the attitude that it's got to be my way or take the highway. And in a democracy that is representing a very large country, a diverse country, a very complicated country, you simply cannot build consensus in order to govern if this continues. Now, I can tell you that I am frustrated. You're seeing a lot of other people that are frustrated. When you take that kind of atmosphere and you put it on top of the United States Senate rules that say that we can't pass anything unless you close off debate with 60 votes, and where that is being forced not on every issue as it is, but where it's being forced on procedural issues such as the motion to proceed to a bill, that we have to go through all of the rigmarole of getting 60 votes to cut off debate. Is it any wonder that we are in gridlock? Now, elections have a way of cleansing things, but I'm not so sure that this one will. All of this, it's my way or no way, is in a changed environment. It is certainly exacerbated by the fact that we are in a recession and people are angry. They're frightened. They don't know where they're going to get a job. You add to that this lack of ability to get along, and on top of that, instant communication. Now, it used to be in the old days, that a newspaper editor served as a filter in which to fact check and determine whether or not something was factually accurate. What has happened today with instant communication, with things being put up on blogs as if it is truth, and with the mainstream media picking up those blogs or having their own blogs and not doing the fact-checking. You have a proliferation of information as if it is truth, and then aided and abetted by cable news stations that are not news, they're entertainment. You grind that into the mix, and is it any wonder that we are in gridlock? Now, out of this gridlock, we're trying to formulate policy. And the subject for today is our nation's space program. And I want you to know that we are teetering right on the edge. The posture that we have found ourselves in, way back in the summer, we pulled off a near miracle in getting consensus in the Senate, passed the NASA bill unanimously out of the Commerce Committee, and then took it to the floor and passed it, the last bill, before the August recess at 10 o'clock on a Thursday night, passed by unanimous consent. You can imagine how near miraculous that was with the environment that I just described to you. But now what we have is a House of Representatives that is insisting on a proposal that they have that has only come out of committee that takes a very different approach, and all of the pride of a separate body, the pride of individuals is getting in the way. But it's come down to this. This Wednesday or Thursday, there's only one chance to pass the NASA bill, and that is for the House to accept the Senate bill, to put it up on what they call a suspension calendar, which requires that you have 2/3 vote of the House of Representatives to pass it. If this happens, then it will go to the President for signature. And then it will be the blueprint, the roadmap for the future of NASA. Now, I'm going to get into some of the details of that. We can't have a compromise, a so-called compromise, because in attempts to do that in good faith, we now have a group of senators that are saying they will not accept anything coming back in the way of a NASA bill. So we've got one shot. Now, if you all recall 10, 15 years ago, there was a movie called Apollo 13. This is about the crew, and it's one of the greatest space feats that we've had, because basically we had 3 dead men on the way to the moon. And one of the most extraordinary space successes in the history of humankind is how real-time the engineers, backup astronauts, the team at Kennedy all came together and figured out how, after that explosion had occurred 2/3 of the way to the moon, what they could do to get them back. And Jim Lovell, the commander, in Apollo 13, a politician tells Tom Hanks, the actor who is playing Jim Lovell, he says, "Jim, people in my state are asking why we're continuing to fund this program now that we've beaten the Russians to the moon." And just remember what Jim Lovell said. Imagine if Christopher Columbus came back from the New World and no one ever returned in his footsteps. It's been said that a society that does not seek to expand and explore is a society that's going to wither. And it's not going to foster creativity and freedom and individuality and progress. And that's one of the extraordinary things that has expressed the American character. We are by natures explorers, adventurers. We've always had a frontier. Back in the old days, it was a westward frontier. Now, it's upward. This country was founded by explorers, and they were following the longings of their soul. That's what makes us unique as Americans. And then what we've seen as this country has developed over 2 centuries, we've seen that each generation has advanced constantly and consistently. And now we are literally, with regard to our space program, at the point of saying, well, what do we do next? I believe it's a destiny that was proclaimed by President Kennedy nearly 50 years ago. He spoke in philosophical terms about the need to solve the mysteries of the universe. This is what he said. If the history of our progress teaches us anything, it is that man, in his quest for knowledge and progress, is determined and cannot be deterred. The exploration of space, he said, will go ahead whether we join it or not. It's one of the great adventures of all time, and no nation which expects to be a leader among the nations can expect to stay behind. That was President Kennedy. So just look at these extraordinary things that have happened in front of the eyes of your parents and their parents in this country, specifically in this part of the world. Look what's happened in the last 50 years. We've gone to the moon 40 years ago, and with unmanned craft, we've gone far beyond, out and even out of the solar system. And during this time, that half century, it's produced thousands of scientists and mathematicians, engineers. A lot of that excitement that occurred back there in the days of President Kennedy when we sent the first human into space and then rocketed John Glenn into space, it's helped make this nation the most advanced technologically on Earth. I remember one time I was a young congressman and I was down at the White House, and our Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill, he motioned me over and he says, you know, Bill, I remember being here when I was a young Boston congressman, and I was at the White House with President Kennedy, and I've never seen him so nervous. He was just pacing back and forth like a cat on a hot tin roof. And Tip said he spoke to one of the assistants and said, "What's wrong with the president?" Well, the Soviet Union had beat us into space by surprising us by launching Gagarin into one orbit. We did not even have a rocket that had enough power to get that little tiny Mercury capsule up into orbit. So we were going on a Redstone rocket that was just going to take us into suborbit. And we were getting ready to launch it. Alan Shepard, the first to go into space, only suborbit. And Kennedy was so nervous because he knew that this entire nation's quest for technological superiority, for the ability to compete against a Soviet Union that was trying to do us in, he knew it was on the line. And of course, Alan Shepard flew in that suborbit, Gus Grissom flew, and then they decided to take an Atlas rocket. We knew it had a 20% chance of failure, and stick that Mercury capsule on top of it, and John Glenn climbed in. All the instruments indicated that once John was on orbit, that his heat shield was loose. And on re-entry, if that were true, he would have burned up. And of course, the last words of John Glenn as they entered that blackout period on reentry, where all of the hot, fiery, ionized gas blacks out the transmission. They could hear John humming the battle hymn of the Republic. This is what has made this nation great, and it's what has inspired our people. And this little program has also advanced the cause of science and dramatically improved the quality of life of the rest of us here on Earth. GPS, where do you think that comes from? Satellites that track hurricanes, monitor climate change, airbags for automobiles, modern medical miracles such as kidney machines, and heart ultrasound equipment and LASIK surgery. It's all come out of our nation's space program. And as a result of all of this push, we have created a great number of new companies and tens of thousands of jobs for skilled workers. And I believe that we will continue to share in this. So we have been working with the White House, and I must say, the White House hasn't had its act in order. They've been at cross purposes. They did a great disservice to the president, who is a true fan of the space program. And the way they rolled out the president's NASA budget, whereas he had proposed a $6 billion increase for NASA over the next 5 years, an increase that very few other agencies of government had received, all of that got lost in the fact that they didn't know what they were doing in trying to explain the program, and they gave the perception by using the word cancel the Constellation program, instead of inserting the word restructure the Constellation program. They gave the perception that the president was going to kill the manned space program. Well, I've never seen so many selfish companies in my life, as they were all fighting only for their particular interest instead of coming together. And somehow, out of all of this, with a good deal of partisanship getting in the way, we were able to pass that Senate bill. Fortunately, we were able to get the president's ear. He came to the Kennedy Space Center earlier this year, and he laid out a new goal. And the goal was that Mars is the ultimate goal by a flexible path. And basically, that's what this Senate bill does. We certainly are in the era that more nations and commercial operators can go into space. The Cold War shaped a program that has now receded into history. We're now joined on the International Space Station by Russia and 14 other nations. And so this legislation that we'll find out if it passes this week is going to reduce the amount of time that we have to depend on Russia after the space shuttle is shut down, by building a new heavy lift rocket, by accelerating the development of commercial rockets to go to and from the space station. And it will keep in place much of the talent at the Kennedy and Johnson Space Centers. Now, this week is bittersweet. We have hope for the future with a new space program with exciting new goals, while a major job layoff accelerates starting this Thursday. This NASA bill would push development of this new heavy lift rocket with a goal to fly by 2016. Right off the bat, that would hire 2,000 of the space workers that otherwise would be losing their jobs. And it would make a significantly higher investment in commercial space ventures, and that too would be, over the course of the next several years, hiring an additional 2,000 of those workers. And that acceleration of commercial cargo that is already under contract would accelerate into commercial crew to and from the space station. The Senate bill reverses the policy that the space station was going to be shut down in 2015. Here it is, 2010. We haven't even gotten it completed. Over the next 2 flights, and we are in this bill adding a 3rd flight, the station will be complete. And we will keep it alive to do the science and the experimentation in the zero-gravity orbit, which is what the station was designed for, and to keep it alive at least until 2020. The bill supports the development of in-space technology that can help with the servicing and reusing equipment to lessen the need to launch from Earth. So what that is, we take a lot of components up into low Earth orbit, and there we learn to do refueling on orbit, to do assembly of large spacecraft, and to get ready to venture on out beyond the Earth's system of either the moon and go further out. One of my crewmates, Franklin Chang Diaz, a PhD from MIT, is developing a plasma rocket. He's been working on this for 10 years. It's going to be taken up in a smaller demonstration size to the space station. And when it is perfected, it will take us to Mars in 39 days instead of the 10 months by conventional technology. These are the exciting new developments of technologies that will have enormous application to us here on Earth. And so, we are directing in this bill that NASA start this process to pursue an evolvable system, because there will be things that will be developed, new technologies created that we simply don't know about now. And then we have to come back to the hard reality. We have to make it affordable. We are in a time of limited resources. We're in a time of huge budget deficits. We're in a time where increasingly it is going to be difficult to get appropriations. And designing and building within the budget is going to be a challenging new approach for NASA, because NASA in the past has been accustomed to the build and toss away approach to spaceflight. But minding the budget is obviously a critical element. And in the process, there's going to have to be discipline. Our objectives now are not beyond just getting to and being in space. We've been there. We now have to answer some new questions. Can we harness new sources of energy in space for use up there and down here on Earth? Can we sustain human life on distant journeys? By the way, if we go to Mars in 39 days, once you get to Mars, you got to stay there for a year because of the alignment of the planets, that Mars does not get back in alignment closest to Earth for 1 year. So can we sustain human life on distant journeys? Can we develop the technology for these journeys? Can we establish permanent outposts beyond Earth? I believe that the answer is yes to all of these questions. And our vision is that we will explore first, maybe back to the moon, then asteroids, and then the surface of Mars, as America and the rest of humanity journey toward our ultimate destiny in the stars. Lou, that's my report, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
My question to Senator Nelson is, you mentioned that that the cloture process is sometimes a difficult hurdle when it comes to financing things like the space program. Are you against the cloture process? Do you think that we should eliminate the supermajority that's necessary right now?
The short answer is no. But I'm against the rules of the Senate being used in obstructionist tactics where it has been abused. In the history of the Senate, the higher hurdle to pass legislation in the Senate compared to the House has served the nation well for over 2 centuries. Because the more difficult legislative hurdle to overcome has caused the Senate to be more reflective, to be the cooling saucer, sometimes in the House's hot rush to judgment. Over time, it has been abused. And the best example of that was during the Civil Rights era, where a group of senators, primarily from the South, from segregated states, used a procedure. Then it was 67 votes to stop debate, to close off a filibuster. And as a result of the misuse of the Senate rules, the threshold was lowered. You just can't go in and change the rules. The rules, in order to be changed, have to be changed by a 2/3 vote. But there was such an abuse of that rule during civil rights that it was lowered to 60 votes. The problem now is that it is being used on virtually every piece of legislation and almost every nomination, particularly when it comes to higher appellate court judges. And of course, that was simply never intended, and you can't function that way. So I think we're going to look at some kind of reform of the rule. I don't know what form it's going to take, but we don't want to overdo it and suddenly take 2 1/4 centuries of stability in a representative democracy and throw it out the window. But right now, it's being terribly abused.
Is cloning possible, Senator? We could clone you and get 99 more up there. We maybe get something done?
Well, of course, that's what I said about you, Lou. Lou is a Republican, I'm a Democrat, and if the two of us could get together and decide things, we could get things back on track. But what is unique in America is that, take, for example, the state of Wyoming. Wyoming has less than 6% unemployment. Wyoming has as much voting power as Florida or California does in the Senate. The Wyoming senators have a totally different outlook from necessarily the California or Florida or New York or Texas senators. And out of all of this, you've got to build consensus. That's why there's got to be people of goodwill that are willing to talk to each other, that are willing to sit down and understand that the other fella has a point of view, that are willing to implement basically what the good book says, which is the golden rule: treat others as you want to be treated. But there's been too much nastiness going on in Washington, and sadly, it's happened in Tallahassee as well.
Back there on the left side was her question I saw.
In President Obama's April 15th speech, he specifically excluded the moon for NASA's program, saying pretty much we've been there, done that. But in your closing statement just now, you said the moon was our destination before asteroids and Mars. Do you think that the White House will reverse their position on this?